don't feel good, Mom. I'll call the doctor.
Yes, Mrs. Jetson, somebody got a pain in the tummy tum-tum?
This is the future we were promised. But like jetpacks and flying cars, virtual doctor's visits have mostly been the realm of science fiction. That is, until the COVID-19 pandemic. As in-person doctor's visits grew risky, regulators acted to temporarily remove barriers preventing greater use of telehealth. With millions of Americans taking advantage, the past few months have ushered in a grand experiment in the nation's healthcare system. The big question is, what will happen when the virus goes away?
Telehealth is a way for doctors and patients to communicate virtually from home. So your doctor should be able to diagnose and treat you to a certain extent. But there are some roadblocks when it comes to telehealth.
For patients, the appeal of not having to leave your house to talk to a doctor is obvious. And doctors like the efficiency and flexibility telehealth provides. A match made in heaven, right? It's not that simple. The lack of widespread use of telehealth before coronavirus largely came down to two things: privacy and money. Let's tackle privacy first. Anyone who's visited a doctor's office and signed those forms about how their information will be used knows about HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act.
Is everybody here?
Signed into law in 1996 by President Bill Clinton, HIPAA was later amended to allow patients access to their health data.
Telehealth comes into play when we're talking about data protection. So the privacy and security rules is basically what marries telehealth to HIPAA.
HIPAA requires that health providers and insurers protect patients' data. It also requires that electronic health information is secure when transferred online. As a result, companies looking to do business with healthcare providers must enter into official contracts. These business associate agreements require tech companies to adhere to the same patient data protection and security standards as doctors. But for many doctors, even using approved platforms hasn't been worth the risk.
Doctors have been a little bit hesitant to try telemedicine when it comes to regulatory red tape around HIPAA. If they make one single HIPAA violation, they can be hit with fees per year up to $1.8 million.
Which brings us to the second barrier to widespread telehealth: money. Specifically, insurance money. Until the pandemic, Medicare and Medicaid wouldn't pay health providers for telehealth services except for rural patients and those with rare conditions. Private insurers tended to follow suit.
Doctors wanted to try telehealth for a while, and they weren't getting reimbursed in the way that they would if they were doing in-person visits.
Then came COVID-19. Amid concerns over the safety of visiting a doctor's office, the Department of Health and Human Services eased many of the rules that prevented widespread use of telehealth.
Today, we're also announcing a dramatic expansion of our Medicare telehealth services.
HHS's Office for Civil Rights said in March that doctors could use non-public facing applications. They basically said, we won't hit you with penalties if you need to talk to your patients this way.
Regulators also made it easier for doctors to be paid the same for virtual visits as for in-person visits. And nearly every state relaxed licensing requirements during the pandemic, making it easier for doctors to treat patients online without first establishing an in-person relationship. In many cases, doctors are now even allowed to treat patients across state lines. With regulatory barriers out of the way and an eager public, telehealth has boomed during the pandemic. The week before national stay-at-home orders were put in place, Medicare reported 11,000 people used telehealth services. A month later, in the throes of the pandemic, visits were up to 1.3 million for the week, a staggering 12,000% increase. The big question is, what happens next? In theory, the HHS allowances end when the pandemic does, but regulators have hinted that some elements of telehealth are likely to stay in place.
Healthcare industry experts are expecting for telehealth to continue, and not only continue, but really boom. Regulators want this. HHS wants this. Patients want this. Doctors want this. For once, especially in healthcare, everybody is on the same team.
This might finally be the moment when our virtual doctor science fiction becomes reality. Now, about those jetpacks.